to Room 237, back with another review of a film that came out in the era that was sort of the height of the American torture porn genre, mainly from the mid to late 2000s. And my last review, Captivity, I said was one that was really like at the bottom, towards the bottom of the genre. This is one I would say is actually worse than that. I'm really not sure. I probably would say this is the worst, or one of the worst, maybe worse than Captivity, and it's 2006's Turistas. Now, I do remember when this came out. I didn't see this when it first came out. I saw it years later, around the same time as Captivity. But I remember when this came out, it looked just like a sort of tropical version of Hostel. I think that's how it was marketed. I think that's what it was going for. Even a lot of the plot points and things that happen in the build-up is very much like Hostel. But I've never been a fan of this film at all. Uh, Michael Gringold from Fangoria, a better and scarier film than Hostel. Despite all the problems I have with Hostel, that's certainly a better film than this. But I mean, scarier maybe just because it is a more realistic plot. But I would have to admit that Hostel is way better than Turistas. Uh, so yeah, 2006, pretty much the very height of the genre. I mean, Saw 3 was out, Hostel was already out. Uh, I believe it was the same year as Captivity. It was the last one I reviewed, and I already forgot when that came out. But it was produced and directed by John Stockwell, who's had a long filmography, acting and directing. He was, I know him most as Dennis from Christine. He directed an episode of the Friday 13th series, and I believe a couple earlier episodes of Dexter. Written by Michael Arlen Ross, and it stars Josh Duhamel, Melissa George, Olivia Wilde. I actually forgot she was in this. Desmond Askew, Bo Garrett, Max Brown. I want to see exactly Desmond Askew because he was also in The Hills Have Eyes, but I wanted to see who he was in that. But I do know that Melissa George, I believe, was in um, the Amityville Horror remake. Sorry, I'm skipping so much. Oh, okay. Well, who the hell was he? He's one of the English guys in this, but who the hell was he in Hills Have Eyes? Sorry, that's just kind of tripping me out. Oh, he was Big Brain? Really? Okay. I did not know that. It's kind of cool. But anyway. Uh, yeah. Put out by Fox Atomic. It was made for 10 million and it made 14.7. So small margin. I'm not sure what the marketing was. But probably one of the more interesting things about this movie would have been the uh, controversy throughout the release because uh, people in Brazil were very upset by this. It kind of had the same effect as Hostel 2, where they felt it was Americans kind of taking a stab at don't go here because they'll torture you or bad things will happen. And several people like Josh Duhamel apologized. John Stockwell did make a comment, but so yeah, kind of protests here. This is where I was looking. Yeah, it was boycotted by some citizens in Brazil. But then the agency of tourism said that something about they were grateful for the bad critical reception, and they didn't feel that the movie would really hurt their image, and I don't think it did. Which John Stockwell did say he mentioned a movie that wasn't very flattering to a place. Eli Roth said people still go to Texas after Chainsaw Massacre, so. But again, that's probably one of the more interesting aspects about this film. Oh, I guess I can't really say that because it's not really just torture for the sake of torture. It is a bit more real world horror. Uh, a group of American tourists, they go to Brazil. There's an accident with the bus. Our three main characters meet up with some other tourists, two English guys, this young blonde couple. They go down to this beach bar. They get drugged, and then they become hunted by this doctor and his goons as part of a black market of organ trafficking or organ harvesting. Now, this movie is also known as Tourists, which Turistas is the Portuguese and Spanish word for tourists. Uh, but I also heard it's Spanish for diarrhea or traveler's diarrhea, which is very fitting. But I believe in the UK it's also known as Paradise Lost, which isn't a bad title. And yeah, this movie actually has less torture than Hostel, if you could believe that. That's one of the main reasons why I thought Hostel was so disappointing. Because the trailer made it look like it was the next big torture film. And it was pretty much just like a douchey frat comedy up until about the halfway point. One torture scene. And then we see Jay Hernandez get a little tortured, then escape, and then that's the movie. Here, again, kind of like Hostel, we see a couple of our characters drugged, then they're abducted, we see them get killed very quickly with the machete, and then the girlfriend runs, comes to a cliff, and just falls off in CGI. And then as the rest of our characters finding out they've been robbed after being drugged, this one native, which there's even a scene with kids. They realize that this young kid is wearing Josh Duhamel's hat, so they chase after him. The kids throw rocks at him. I think the kid either ends up being pushed or punched. Then everyone gets mad at them. So you have a scene with kids even stealing something from the main character, like in a Hostel. And then this one native decides to take him out to this house that he knows of where they can lay low, hopefully get some help. But the house is the rendezvous for where this doctor is. I wanted to get the actor's name who played the doctor. I don't even remember the doctor's name, to be honest. Looks like I can't even click on any other actors' names. Oh well. Oh, and really the only blood and gore scene we get is once the guys show up, the doctor and his goons show up at the house. They put the rest of our characters in dog cages. Uh, Josh Duhamel, Bo Garrett, and Olivia Wilde. There are three main characters. Duhamel and Wilde are brother and sister. Garrett is Wilde's best friend. She's on a table, drugged, and through the scene and exposition, we find out, oh, because Americans have always taken from us, and the waiting list for organs is 7 years in America, longer in other countries. So when rich people in America want an organ, they don't want to wait. They come down to Brazil where they take advantage of, you know, our economy, and they're able to get what they want very fast. So he's giving back by taking organs out of gringos and then bringing it to the hospital in Rio. He explains this as he's taking liver and kidneys out of Bo Garrett. The gore effects are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They look decent. That's just the only scene we get. And then Desmond Askew is in the back, tied up because he's next in line. But then that's when everyone else breaks out their cages. One by one, they're kind of killed or hunted until, because Desmond Askew's best friend from England, he tries to save him, but they both get shot. And, they end up... The most interesting part of the film, and the most exciting part of the film, would be the underwater cave sequence. Uh, which I will give it. The cinematography is decent. It does look kind of generic. Of course, with the cast, it does have that sort of CW horror movie feel. But they do make great use of their setting. There is a lot of shots of the ocean and the beach and the more jungly areas, and especially the caves. And eventually it's just Duhamel Wild and Melissa George with that native, because once the bad guys come in, he flees, but then he goes back to help them. And they're being chased by one of the goons through these underwater caves. They have to keep coming out into these air pockets. And the air pockets keep getting smaller and smaller until there's just like these little tiny ones, just like wide enough, big enough to do that. And the sound is cool. If I remember correctly, it's like dead silent when we see them swimming underwater. But then when they go up and we just see the air kind of go away, it makes like the sound. So I thought that was cool. And the underwater sequences look great. I mean, you just see how deep and open this area is, and just how deeper the caves and crevices go. The whole film is decently shot, but the underwater sequences are great. I will say that is the best part of the film. And it is really the only exciting slash suspenseful part of the film. And then when they make it out of the caves, because the guy that's chasing them only has an arrow. He didn't bring his actual crossbow because he can't swim well with it, so he just brings an arrow. She gets it from him, stabs him. I do like the shot of him just sinking all the way down, and we just see how deep this area is. But they end up in this opening. That doctor's there. Joshua Hamill starts beating him, but then they stop him because they think maybe he's helped. But then his last goon comes out, and we've seen before how abusive he is to the guys that work for him. Like, one guy kept looking at his phone while he's trying to explain something. The doctor ended up stabbing him in the eye. I mean, that was kind of a decently written scene. It kind of reminded me, very different movie, of The Untouchables. The batter up scene when he's talking about baseball and how we all have a role to play. Granted, The Untouchables is a much better movie, but it kind of reminded me of that. Like, the best thing to do is always the right thing. Second best thing to do is always the wrong thing. But the worst thing to do is nothing. And that's when he stabs the guy in the eye. So, as the doctor's like laying there beaten, and he's got his last guy with a rifle, he's insulting him, calling him useless, and kill the gringos. But Melissa George is able to speak Portuguese, which I guess she actually did learn Portuguese for this. She's able to break through to him and be like, we did nothing to you, listen to how he treats you. Guy calls him a fucking coward, he shoots him. And then they end up outside where they're found by someone, they're treated, given clothes, and then they get on a plane. Tries to end on kind of a funny note where these tourists behind them, the wife or girlfriend wanted to take the bus because it's more the experience. The the husband's like, no, we'll just take the plane. And then Joshua Hamlin's like, take the plane because of what happened with their bus, which is their driver sucked. It was on a cliff, and they all had to get out the windows, and then you see it roll down the hill. So yeah, you really, other than people being shot, as far as the actual torture porn scenes, there's only one. I wouldn't really count the younger blonde couple earlier in the film, the first ones to be abducted. Because one guy just gets hacked with a machete and the other one falls off a cliff. We really just get one scene of gore and blood. It even then it's not really torture. I mean, it doesn't really look like backyard surgery. He has decent implements and everything, and he does kind of put her to sleep and like a numbing agent, so it's not like she feels anything. In which case, so it's kind of the furthest thing from torture. Of course, they're taking her organs without consent, and she seems kind of aware because she keeps looking down, but she's super drugged. So they can't feel anything. It's more medical than it is torture. The only thing I'll give it that makes it a little scarier than Hostel is that this is something you can run into. There are organ harvesters, not just in Brazil but all over. But it does have the same problems as Hostel, where it's just, I will say these have more likable characters and characters you actually care about more so than Hostel. But it takes way too long to get to it, too long of a build up, and even hitting those plot points. Like, okay, they get drugged, they try to figure out what happened to them. These local kids, they become a small problem. Realize they stole the hat, looks like they're in on it somehow. Someone leads them to this place where once they get inside, it's all over. And that's sort of the whole base for these operations. Granted, it's not a purchase for murder organization. I will say that that aspect is more interesting. Hostel just didn't do a very good job with it. So yeah, this definitely could have been better. I mean, I'm not saying you have to have cover to cover torture or in this case surgery, but as far as the torture porn genre goes, this is definitely the most tame, especially since you only get one scene. And again, she's numbed, kind of asleep, and it's done is more of a surgery than it is torture. But yeah, definitely a letdown of a film. It does deserve to be called the tropical hostel. I mean, I would put it the same. Again, it plays like Hostel. Literally, take Hostel, the same plot points and story, but just move it from that part of Europe to Brazil. Pretty much plays out the same, even the smaller plot points. I keep saying that because I was surprised to see how similar it was to Hostel. I was even more surprised to find out it had even less torture than Hostel, which was my biggest problem with that movie. But yeah, not very good. The acting is okay. I mean, it has familiar people that would go on to do other things, but really, there's not too much of a story to really get behind. It's just they're drugged, realize they're robbed, need to get help, and just led to a dangerous place. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this movie at all. I don't care for it. From what I've seen and from what I remember, as far as mainstream releases during the height of the torture porn era and genre, so far this is the worst one. I would say this is worse than Captivity, worse than all the Saw sequels, even the reboots. I would even say it's worse than Hostel 2 and 3. And I don't care for 2. I hate Hostel 3. But, yeah, worse than Captivity. Uh, yeah, really nothing I can say about it. Other than the idea of it being organ harvesters with tourists, okay. Decent, but they don't do enough with it. And the only sequence I found exciting, cool, moderately suspenseful, and beautifully shot is the underwater sequences in the cave, like that chase. Other than that, pretty useless movie. And after rewatching it, because it's been probably around a decade since I last saw this, it's easy to see why and how it became so forgotten. But yeah, that is what I would say, again, as far as mainstream releases go, not independent, but which really torture porn was kind of designated to these uh, widespread releases. It was kind of the step above splatter films, was that it did get a mainstream release. I would have to put this at the bottom. I would say this is the worst one so far. But anyway, yeah, that's 2006's Turistas. Thank you for watching.